All righty. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully, you can all hear me. Thank you all for joining us for our third and final Trees Forever Tree Keeper session. It's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you guys these evenings the last few weeks, but unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. But don't worry, there's much more to come. So we'll hope you enjoy tonight's final presentation. As a reminder, throughout this process, please make sure you're still muted. Make sure that you're typing questions or comments you have in the chat, which I will be moderating, and we'll have Q&A sections for each of our presenters tonight to talk about the different topics. Starting off today, I think I'm going to turn it right over to Ben Vaughn, who is our Urban Forestry Project Manager out of our Marion office, who will be talking to us today about pests and diseases. So let's please give him our attention. Take it away, Ben.
Yeah. Like like Enzo said, I've been at Trees for over 3 years or so now. I'm a urban forestry project manager there, and I'm also a certified arborist. And today we're just going to be talking about pests, diseases, tree stressors, and kind of how they all tie in together, and relate, especially in an urban environment. So, how do you know if a tree is stressed? So, there's decay, which would be a more, far gone symptom. So, if you see there's rotting wood, in the trunk or within a branch, dieback would be like we see in the top left of this tree here, where some of the branches are not leafing out. Means they're probably dead, and the tree is stressed and compensating by choosing some branches to no longer support, or their root system is, somehow damaged in a way that they can't, support these branches anymore, or along the trunk, any of these things. So a lot of different things can contribute to tree stress, but that's one of the main symptoms. Also, water sprouts. So you can see that at the bottom of the tree, kind of these suckers that will come up, as well as you can get witch's broom, which is where, whole branches will start shooting up a bunch of like straight up little branches. And that's usually to compensate for some sort of damage or stress that's happening elsewhere in the tree. It's trying to get as much energy as it can by shooting up a bunch of shoots, getting a bunch of leaves and chlorophyll, but those aren't necessarily, great for the structure of the tree and the long-term health of the tree. And so you want to prune those off. Not to go a little off topic, but there's also wilting. I think we all know what that means. Commonly with a water issue, early leaf drop, and then early fall coloration. So if trees are turning color in August, let's say, it might be a drought or otherwise stress issue with the tree. So this is obvious sign of decay. Like I was talking about earlier, you can see the inside of that heartwood's already starting to rot. There's going to be water pooling in that, contributing even more. And so while the top of the tree might look completely healthy because let's say two-thirds of the cambium is intact around the tree, so it's able to send up plenty of water and stuff, this tree is structurally not very sound because the heartwood is like almost completely, maybe halfway or two-thirds the way gone through the tree. Dieback, this is a little more clear example. It's losing a good portion of that upper canopy. And it's hard to say, without being in person, what exactly, is causing that. Early fall coloration. These two trees are right next to each other. They look to be probably the same type of tree, but one of them is really stressed. So again, need to be in person to kind of tell, but that is a sign that that tree is doing worse than the other one. Wilting leaves. Okay, and so these are some of the things that can cause stress in trees. So insects, and they can do this in multiple different ways, and we're going to go over some of the more specific insects through this presentation. Disease, that's oftentimes caused by funguses, commonly in trees that will cause problems. And a lot of times that will have a relationship with insects and that the insects carry fungal spores with them or allow entry points for fungus to take hold. Because a fungus won't really do, anything or be able to do anything to a live tree that has a, fully intact bark and everything like that. So. Natural conditions and weather. As anyone who's from especially eastern Iowa, the last 5 years would know, um, wind can have a huge impact on trees, as well as lightning and other things. The amount of rain we're getting can seriously impact, especially trees that aren't super well established, or say you're trying to plant a container tree in your yard and it's during a drought season, that's gonna really struggle and you'll have to baby it because it doesn't have the root system like a developed tree would. And there's also infrastructure and man-made human stressors. And this is a really clear example of basically, cutting off the circulation of half of either of these trunks. But there's also, concrete everywhere where this is, preventing water from getting in the ground, compaction from vehicles, people walking, and all kinds of human-made stressors. And we're going to go over some of those as well later here. Okay, so starting off with insects, we have the emerald ash borer. I think most people now are pretty familiar with this one, just because of the impact it's had. So in Cedar Rapids, we had, I want to say 27% of the canopy was ash trees,
Check, check,
pre-derecho.
check.
And so basically all of those are dead now. And if they aren't dead, they'll be dead soon. Unless they're treated basically every other year, um, the ash borers will result in the death of the tree, and they do it pretty quickly. They'll start from the tips of the branches, and so you'll see dieback there, and then they'll just eat further down the trunk, and you'll see it shooting up a lot of that water spouts, witch broom type branches as it's going out. But yeah, this is one where it's kind of just recommended that you don't plant an ash tree now. And if you do have a nice one that you want to take care of, yeah, it will take those yearly or other yearly injections, unless you're really lucky and it's like far away from every other ash tree. And a way to reduce this is not transporting firewood that isn't local. At this point, it is pretty widespread, so that's kind of a drop in the bucket. But yeah, right now it's just recommended that we kind of avoid ash planting ash trees. Signs of the ash borer, like I said, they'll start at the tips, eat down to the trunk of the tree here, and it'll start shooting up just a lot of messy material just to try to get any energy from that sunlight. Also, I kind of skipped over. They have these very distinct track marks under the bark here, and that's like a very clear sign that that's what happened. Again, you can see kind of in this picture here, same deal. But if you have an ash tree and it's dying, it's pretty likely that this is the culprit. This is another sign. So the woodpeckers don't, necessarily do damage to live trees, especially like a live healthy tree that doesn't have any damage, but they will try to get these borers. And so you see these areas, it's called flecking, where the woodpeckers will take off the bark trying to get to insects. And this is, seen in other things other than ash borer, a lot of boring insects. That's what the woodpeckers are going after. Which also, this will kind of be a common theme in these other insects and diseases that we go over. But having and supporting a healthy ecosystem and, providing, natural pollinating plants, natural or native trees, this will like support woodpecker life to be in your neighborhood or support other ladybugs or other things that take care of pests. So, and it's cheaper and better looking than doing treatment or, trying to kill all the bugs or something like that. So Japanese beetles. So these again are spreading. They're in Iowa. They aren't, as extreme in as the ash borer, as they don't usually fully kill trees. They like some varieties of maples, Japanese maples. They also like um, different linden varieties. Silver lindens do better than American lindens, but yeah, they will, defoliate parts of the tree. So basically, they'll just eat completely through the leaves. And again, not a huge concern. Um, if you do see them, you're supposed to, kill them. Again, having native wildlife that will eat these will help you out. Also, not planting a bunch of like the same type of tree together. Maybe don't plant a line of American lindens right together because that will attract more of the beetles. They also sell like little attractant traps. But the caveat with that is I'm not sure, how well it does that it'll attract, more beetles than you had in the first place. Um, but yeah, this is just kind of a one to be aware of now that we're learning about. So the spongy moth, it's kind of on the periphery of Iowa, but this one does a similar thing, but it can defoliate the tree completely. And that's because they'll kind of stick to the same area or trees year over year, and they'll lay these egg sacs you can see on the trunk. And then every spring, the caterpillars will hatch. They'll defoliate the tree, and if they do that every year, it'll just lead to the tree dying completely. So you can see a picture here. This is an area where they've obviously been here for a few years now during this cycle. They're not native to the U.S. They're an invasive species. Same with obviously the Japanese beetle and the emerald ash borer. This one, because the egg sacs are so big and visible, and this will have like tons of eggs in them, you can actually just take soapy water and get these off of the trunk if you see these on your tree. And just know it's a pretty distinct caterpillar. If you see this, that's what's going on. And they're coming from somewhere. They're, like I said, they don't spread necessarily long distances. Um, from fall to spring, because they're in that egg sac. So you should be able to spot them out if you know what you're looking for and just take care of it in the fall. And you want to make sure there's not even any on the ground, like just throw these things away because they can still hatch. Oak gall, so this is more just an interesting one than one to be threatened by, and this is also a lot of times completely native varieties of wasps or other insects. But it is interesting how it works. So when you see this, you would think like, a bug laid an egg here or something. But this whole capsule is actually made by the oak tree in these cases. And a lot of times they're called oak apples, especially if they're big ones like this. And what happens is the wasp will lay an egg basically in the bud of the tree during the fall, and then the it has a chemical basically reaction within the bud where it tricks it to making this super weird leaf. And so this is actually just made of leaf and tree material. And then there's a little like worm, that grows into a wasp eventually, and then they'll fly out in the springtime. But just kind of an interesting thing. And once you see these type of things, you'll see them everywhere. You're like, oh, okay, I know what that is now. Scales. So this also might be something you've noticed maybe on leaves before, or in some cases. So let me scoot back a bit. So the scales are just a little insect, and a lot of times once they're in their adult form, they don't move at all. And they'll just basically suck water and nutrients out of the leaves. And this can lead to defoliation over time. Even more so than the gypsy moth, they are really slow moving. There isn't an easy way to treat them because they'll be all over the leaves, and then they'll lay these little, droplets. It's their poop, but it's called honeydew, and ants love it, and it can also cause mold, on the leaves. And so it just kind of they bring kind of a few things that aren't, beneficial to the tree. However, this insect, more than any other, can be treated just by having native pollinators because ladybugs and other kinds of wasps and things like that love eating scales. And so, as long as your tree isn't stressed and it's in like a, healthy ecosystem, these should not be a problem at all. And are kind of treatable via the natural environment and having a non-stress tree. And in the case for any of these insects, or diseases, it's largely related to the health of the tree because trees have natural defenses, they have bark, and if they have thick cambium and are able to make healthy leaves, insects won't have as much of an access point to them. And so really a lot of measures you want to take are just preventative, or if it's starting to get some issues, you just want to make sure that it's mulched, make sure that it's watered, especially in a drought season, and that it's kind of in the right type of place too, because certain trees prefer different types of soils and everything like that. So, okay, on to disease. So Rhizosphere, it's a disease in conifers, a lot of spruce trees, and I can't remember what else gets it, but they're basically these little fungal spores that'll grow on the leaves and cause them to die back from the bottom. So this looks very similar to something like drought stress, but this is actually a disease. And this is really treated by just making sure you have good airflow to the tree. It's planted well, it's healthy. There's not a lot you can do. There's, fungicide sprays or whatever that you can apply. You can also make sure that there aren't, needles left on the ground for too long, just sweep them up if you can. But yeah. And any of these, especially in kind of conifer species, once you have this dieback, that opens it up to burrowing beetles that'll drill into the bark. And then that introduces fungus inside of the tree. And then all of that will kind of just be a cascading effect that leads to the death of the tree, if it can't turn around. So oak burr or bur oak blight. This is also a fungus disease. It's pretty similar to oak wilt, but it's more specific to bur oaks, and it's also usually less deadly. So again, even more than the last tree, you want to sweep up these leaves, and it's a little easier because it's actually a leaf and not a little needle. Because whenever it rains, these fungus spores that are on the leaves will basically bounce into the air, reinfect the tree, and this will happen basically kind of starting from the down up, the tree can slowly die over time. And bur oak blight and wilt are pretty prevalent in Iowa, especially like, certain forest areas. I know McBride has had some issues with it. And so we'll just go forward to wilt. And both of these are typically more deadly for red oaks. So I know I just said that this one is specific to bur oak, which is in the white oak family, but standard white oaks and swamp white oaks tend to do better from both of these afflictions, I guess. Oak wilt, pretty similar. You'll see from the edges of the leaves, it'll be browning in, and you can have spotting like this. Um, and this will, over time, kill the tree, especially if it's a red oak. And again, it'll just kind of go year after year. And you can't really do a fungicide treatment because it's an oak tree. It's really big. You have to basically cover all the leaves. So this is, again, just something to be aware of when you're planting trees, and then just making sure that, you get those diseased leaves out of the area as quickly as you can. Um, and yeah. Thousand Cankers. So this is a relationship again between a beetle and a fungus. So this is specific mostly to walnut varieties, specifically black walnut. So these little beetles will just burrow into the bark, and that's doing a little bit of damage to the cambium, not necessarily, killing the tree or anything. But then from that, they introduce these fungus areas that spread and kill more and more of the living part of the tree. So this this is again a very specific tree disease, something to be aware of if you have a black walnut or are thinking about planting a black walnut. And it can be reduced by not having areas of dieback where it's weak that these um beetles can burrow into in the first place. Tar spot. This is probably one that looks worse than it is. Again, this is just a fungus disease. It's very common in certain maple varieties. And it's slow spreading. It's mostly cosmetic, although it will be, this leaf will be less productive because it's not getting the same chlorophyll or getting the same energy as it would be if it was just all green. But mostly a cosmetic thing. And again, just making sure to sweep the leaves in the fall, right as they drop. Okay, now we're going to go over some environmental conditions. We deal with this a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this if you plant a new tree. So, bucks in the late summer, fall, will start rubbing the velvet off of their antlers, and they'll do this really aggressively. And it feels like they mostly look for young trees. I don't know. And sometimes it seems like they have preferences for specific types of trees. Like I've never seen a hackberry or bur oak that has really thick coarse bark. Those don't really have rubbing injuries. But this looks like a river birch here, or tulip trees, or anything like that can have pretty bad damage. And this tree is like it won't be the same for the rest of its life because of this damage. So it's really important because they usually prefer to do this to younger trees. If you have a lot of deer traffic in your area, you're probably best just throwing on one of those tubes, at least a few feet up. They can reach pretty high. And we've lost plenty of trees, via deer rubbing. Rodent damage. I hadn't really seen this much until this last year. We went to a site where we had planted was this business, and I think probably 50% of these like 30 trees were just way worse than this, completely ringed around the bottom because it was right next to this kind of um, you know, bioswale prairie area that had a ton of rabbits. And so in the wintertime when there's not much food, rabbits will go to eat tree bark, especially off specific trees. And so having a tree guard in that situation would have saved us, having to replant a lot of those trees when we go back and work with them next time. So yeah, something to be aware of that I really hadn't seen to such an extent until last year. So in certain areas, like rabbits can completely, destroy even 3 or 4 year old trees. So there's also salt spray if you're planting along the road. This can be an issue if you have less salt tolerant trees, say like a red bud or tulip tree or something right next to the road. Um, this can have an impact and basically look like the symptoms of drought because it's doing the same thing. It's limiting the access that it can get to water. Um, and it can also damage the soil in other ways. And then flooding. Some trees are more capable of handling being flooded, like bald cypress, which you can grow here, can grow basically in standing water. River birch, swamp white oak all do well, even if they have standing water for a little bit. But other trees, if they're spending any extended amount of time with standing water around them, it'll just cause a ton of rotting roots, and then that'll just, destroy the whole energy production system of the tree. It can't send any destroyed roots. It can't support the canopy anymore. It'll start dying back. It'll lose its support in the ground, and eventually weather will probably kill it if the dieback doesn't. So wind damage, this is pretty minor compared to some of the stuff we saw in the derecho, but obviously this can impact a tree. We know that because it, knocks off branches. But aside from that, as I was saying, throughout the presentation, when you have this damage, it's causing stress, and this allows an access point for insects and pests and disease to, take advantage and introduce funguses to this tree, start burrowing into the bark more, eating the dead wood inside. And yeah, so that's kind of how the environmental, human-made, and disease factors can all kind of cascade together. Soil conditions, whether it's like compaction, high pH, any of these things can obviously contribute to stress and eventual death of a tree. Okay, now to some more specific human-made ones. So this kind of shows the impact, clearly there's a bunch of trees here and there isn't now. But something you might not think about is that all of these other trees are now going to be impacted by the compaction of all the vehicles driving over here. They also, probably had connected roots to a lot of these trees. They're also now more exposed to wind and the elements because they aren't protected by the other trees. So you might, start seeing some issues in some of these other trees just because of the stress that was brought on because of this large removal of the rest of the forest there. This looks like a Dawn redwood probably. And it looks really good right now, but it probably hasn't had time to react to what's happening around it. And I'd be curious to see what it looks like the year after or a couple years after this. Because clearly there's been a lot of construction around. You can see the soil is just like, rock basically. It's super compact down. So all this water is basically just going to be flowing off into the grass or standing there. It's going to really limit how breathable the soil is, so the roots can't get oxygen. And I would suspect, this results in at least the decline of the tree. Here it looks like a sycamore or maybe a London plane tree. And the roots have been completely taken out here to put in the sidewalk. And it looks like it was a good planted tree, and a good planted tree will have a root flare above the soil. So, I mean, at the point that they did this, I would think that they might just be responsible for taking the whole tree down because that's basically, what they did here. They've taken out half of its, support system, and I mean that in terms of physically supporting the tree and also being able to support the canopy, by transporting nutrients up. So yeah, I definitely expect pretty immediately that this tree is gonna start choosing areas to die back and declining pretty hard. Kind of a similar issue here. Instead of cutting out any of the tree, they just thought we'll just build right up to it. And there's not, aside from these cracks, there's really not, areas where water can get down to this tree and where it can breathe. And I'm sure everywhere, the pavement and the concrete all around this is super compacted under there. Additionally, you see it has like a wound on the trunk up there where it's trying to heal over. So, but I mean, it does look like it's been there for a little bit at least, enough to crack the concrete. So there's things that a lot of cities are implementing or people can implement just to kind of ensure their trees are more healthy. So this is something cities do. This is kind of a form of permeable pavers. And it's just kind of to make space to reduce that compaction and provide a better root zone under the concrete. It's pretty cool. Not something that we could really implement for our personal selves a lot of times, but just to know, the effects of compaction. And there are, ways that you can aerate your soil. You can add mulch to it. Um, yeah. Here's another impact of infrastructure. So we plant a lot of trees in the right of way, and we don't plant any big trees under the power lines. But that hasn't always been the way and still isn't necessarily the way that people plant trees. Um, and so, then you're taking out a huge portion of this canopy. Obviously, this is going to cause stress to the tree. It's going to have a much shorter lifespan than had it been planted in a regular area. And it doesn't, really look so nice as if you just had maybe a 20-foot, like, service berry or something here. So yeah, just another kind of be aware of the location and environment that you're planting in. This is lawnmower damage, almost certainly. Kind of looks like rabbit damage. But you'll see this a lot of times, especially in like HOAs and stuff, where people might not care too much about individual trees. And one thing to help out, especially if you aren't the one mowing or you are the one who cares about the trees, is that you can just mulch around this, and that's just a natural preventer, of people getting too close and mowing into it. But doing this will have a huge impact on the tree, mowing into it like this. Either of these trees, it's like looks like maybe a quarter to a half of it is gone around the base. And so you're losing, a quarter to a half of the productive, capacity of the tree. It's, not able to send up anything to the top half. Okay, so that's basically all I have. So we'll now open up for questions. Throw it back to Enzo here.
All righty. Well, thank you very much, Ben.
Yeah.
We're going to put a quick quiz in the field here, real quick. Launch that. All right. Hopefully, you can all see that quiz. But as we're answering that, we had a lot of questions come in. So I think we'll just kind of get things kicked off. So we had a question from Kate who felt like after the derecho, even healthy trees seem to have some dieback in the upper branches, but they haven't seen any increase in dieback after that initial couple years. Can you safely assume it was sort of a one-time stressor and the tree is okay now, or is that a sign that it'll continue to have issues? The tree usually looks okay, or the rest of the tree.
Yeah, I would say like obviously, I mean, hopefully the derecho was like a one-time, thing. But yeah, that was like just completely, it would help to know the species of the tree, but if it's bouncing back after it took damage, I mean, it definitely could have gone the other way. But if it's recovering, it's probably past the worst of it at this point, 5 or 6 years out. And I'd be pretty, hopeful for it for sure.
We also had a couple questions come in about galls. So we had one question, are galls dangerous to the tree? And then the other question was, can we cut the gallstones down?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this in the presentation, but they really aren't that dangerous to the tree. And a lot of times they're native species. If they're like a tree on your yard or something and you don't like the look of it, there's no harm in, taking it down, or anything. But they're also pretty sporadic. You might have it one year, might not have it the next year. It just depends if like a wasp happened to land on your oak tree during laying season. So.
Another question here, is Rhizospera the same as needle cast or needle rust?
Yep, that's the same thing as needle cast.
Okay. Another question here. This person thought that needles under trees were sort of a natural mulch. Do you only need to rake or sweep them up if they're infected, or do you always want to rake or sweep those up?
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right, and that they are a natural mulch. And if you don't want to rake your leaves up and you have a healthy tree, like definitely don't bother. But yeah, this is just in the case where you have infected leaves because of that, that kind of loop that I was talking about, where the rain will basically bounce these spores back into the air, reinfect the tree. So yeah, if your tree doesn't have any issues, then definitely,
Another question here. How do we treat earshot? Should we cut that limb off?
Um, I would have to look in. I'm not familiar with what earshot is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I can't.
No worries. Carmen, if you want to send us an email after this meeting, we can probably follow back with you.
Yeah, I can absolutely.
Um,
I can do some reading tonight and shoot you an email tomorrow. But
yeah. So we have another question. So you don't take off an attached leaf where you can see wilt or spots or fungus. Are you saying it's just, or you're saying just wait until they fall naturally?
well, yeah, it would be difficult. I mean, usually it's pretty throughout the tree. I suppose if you did just have it on the bottom branches, you could prune it off. However, if you have an infected tree, you don't really want to make more open wounds on it, especially during the active season. So oak trees in general, you're supposed to prune them during the winter just because it can introduce, access for insects and other fungus. So yeah, that's why I'd be kind of skeptical or concerned about taking all the leaves off. Yeah.
Um, Question, is deer damage mostly limited to the fall rutting season for deer?
Yeah, and in my experience, and I'm also a bow hunter, it's pretty much it's just because they have that felt on their antlers and it's like really itchy to them and they try to rub them off. And it's like within basically a few weeks of the year, it seems like right before rut, that they'll do that. So kind of, August to September. So
Isn't it the is it the willow tree that has like sort of an aspirin in its bark that sometimes leads deer to kind of do the deer rut? Thought I read that
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, yeah. White willows have it's called salicylic acid, and aspirin is acetylsilic acid. So it's just a synthesized version of a chemical that's in white willow bark. And so deer will, kind of notice that and prefer white willows over time. Yeah.
We did have a question. Are there any sort of pines or I guess trees in general that the deer won't rub against or will kind of avoid? This person noted that they usually don't eat or damage red or dawn redwoods, I believe, but that's not a local tree.
Yeah. I suppose one kind of in that same vein that some people don't like is red cedar. They don't, I haven't necessarily seen them, do much to red cedar. Also maybe in that vein would be spruce. Just they have those really coarse needles. So those two options would definitely be better than white pine. I know they definitely will eat white pine and they'll eat even arborvitae or certain juniper. But yeah, really just small trees. If you have a lot of deer problems and they're gonna eat it completely, you might just want to put like a little triangle fence around them just for a couple of years at least, until they grow out of the reach of the deer. So.
Let's see. We just had a question come in from Sally. Do edgers around a tree bordered with sand, is that harmful to the tree?
It definitely can be because it can kind of cause encircling roots because if it's like especially if they're buried kind of in the ground, the roots will hit that wall and just grow back around. So that can constrict the tree eventually. Um, but if it's wide enough, then it's not necessarily a problem. But you definitely don't want to have that like within a foot of the trunk or something like that, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. All right, I think we got pretty much all the answers to our quiz here. So let's go over the answers as a group here real quick. So the first question was, what shaped exit holes do emerald ash borers typically leave when they emerge through the bark? Looks like pretty much everyone got that right. That's a D-shaped hole is usually what they leave, kind of reflecting their overall shape. Question number two was, what causes the growth around a gall? The correct answer was the tree itself is what causes that growth, not the bug. And then question number three was, when should you prune oaks to avoid oak wilt? Looks like everybody got that correct. That is going to be winter when the tree's sort of in its dormant season, as we kind of went over last time. So, yeah, great job, everybody. And thank you very much, Ben. Great presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
All righty. So we'll keep moving ahead, and I'm going to invite Bree Hull, who is our Illinois field coordinator, to talk to us a bit about tree benefits. One of the things as you become a tree keeper is we hope that you become a force for advocacy for trees. So this section is kind of intended to give you some talking points. So yeah, Bree, take it away.
Howdy, y'all. So can everybody hear me okay and see the screen all right?
Yep, you're good.
Fantastic. All right. So, like Enzo said, my name is Bree Hull. I am currently the Illinois field coordinator. I've been with Trees Forever for a little over 2 years now. Most of that time was actually spent over in Iowa as the Northeast Iowa field coordinator. And while I'm more of a prairie expert, this position has also taught me quite a bit about trees, especially the benefits and how we communicate that to others and advocate for trees in our communities. So, in order to advocate best for our trees, it's a good idea to be able to explain in words what's good about trees. It's really easy to look at them and go, well, what's not to like about them? So first, we're going to go over those economic benefits that you can get from trees. Something that I always say, especially to community members, you need to change your language when you speak about trees, depending on the audience that you're talking about. Economic benefits can be really helpful for homeowners like yourselves or cities, anyone you're really speaking with. So it helps with that energy efficiency, of course, which also leads into the decreased heating and cooling costs. It'll actually help with the longevity of public streets, which is a little counterintuitive, but we'll get into that later. It also can help with economic development and reduce damage from flooding and erosion. So jumping straight into that energy efficiency, this is a very wide topic and encompasses quite a few different ways that trees can be utilized in this way, one of which can be as windbreaks, which is super common in Iowa and other agricultural spaces in order to cut that wind speed, and it also happens to help with energy efficiency. So windbreaks, to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, is to put those at the northwest corner of your homes to avoid those very strong northwesterly winds. This has been found to actually reduce those cold winter winds by up to that 50%, which, as we all know, our many trips to the thermostat means that you don't have to worry about that temperature regulation as much. And it also makes it a little more pleasant if you do want to get outside. It also has been found to lower that annual heating and cooling costs by up to 25%. According to the United States Department of Energy, the proper placement of just 3 different trees can save your household between $100 and $250 in energy costs annually. Now, that might not seem like a lot now, but that's just an investment of 3 trees, a one-time cost depending on what the trees are and what size you get. If you get a pretty moderate sized tree, about $100, that's about $300. That's 1 year that you put that in, and it can, up in that first year, it can save you that much just on your energy bill. And from there, it's just pure savings. So it's something to definitely think about, especially when you have a home, but also for public spaces and things like schools and daycares. And bouncing off of that as well, that cost effectiveness is very important. So the cooling impact of a single healthy tree. So we want to highlight that. So make sure that you were paying attention to Ben's presentation, that it is a healthy tree. It is equivalent to 10 room-sized air conditioners operating for 24 hours a day. That was found by the USDA Forest Service, and that is actually available as a pamphlet. It's really interesting, the comparisons that we make to trees, but whatever makes it easiest. All right, guys, so I want you to shake it out. We've been sitting here for a while. It's the evening. Now, in the comments, I would like you to let me know how you think trees can benefit public streets. And like I said earlier, this can seem a little bit counterintuitive. We tend to think of trees as kind of a problem child when it comes to infrastructure, especially sidewalks and streets, as those roots can reach out and kind of dig it up. But how do you think that they can benefit those public streets? Give you just a moment here. I wish I had some music. Enzo had some really great music at the beginning there. All right. Public streets. So, according to the Center of Urban Forest Research, more shade means more time between repaving, which is interesting. So 20% of shade on street improves pavement condition by 11%, which is a 60% savings for resurfacing over 30 years. Working with municipalities, this is a huge cost that they look at, especially for small towns, and Iowa is full of those small towns. If we can reduce the cost of repaving those streets by just adding trees, which has all these other benefits, we can also reduce that cost. Now, the way that this is, you got to think about how the tree actually impacts that space outside of the roots, because it's mostly if you have a well-positioned tree. You have those, I think they're actually just called tree wells, where you dig that spot within the pavement to include it, but it also includes medians. Now, when it comes to the repaving, these street trees actually reduce the amount of direct sunlight and heat that gets concentrated in the pavement. So that reduces the amount that's going to break down over time, at least like by that 20 to 11%. And then you have to think about how the leaves actually keep the water when we have rain from hitting the pavement directly. So it actually directly impacts erosion on those streets. So you'll see a bit less crumbling and you'll see more time between needing to fix those spaces. So it's all about position. And we always say right tree, right place. Now for the economic development. So trees can actually help businesses. They encourage longer and more frequent shopping visits and increase consumer spending by 12% where they are present. That was found by a researcher for the Journal of Forestry. Healthy, mature trees can also increase those property values. So if you are a homeowner or a business owner or any type like that, it has been found that those property values with additional trees increases your value by 10 to 15%. Now, I don't have photos in here, but I do want you to envision in your mind for just a moment a new development. We see them all over the place for homes, and they look great. Maybe you saw it after they reseeded the lawn and the grass came in, but with all of these developments coming in, there's something that's very much missing from a lot of communities, and that happens to be trees. Now, it's something expensive that the developers often don't include when they first build a new development and neighborhood, but over time, that absence is very much felt in the community. And you look at the street and it does not look nearly as welcoming. We've all seen main streets that don't look like this one and don't have that tree cover that we're looking for. And then we have this and it feels more safe and it feels more welcoming and inviting and has all of these additional benefits that we previously talked about. So it doesn't just mean that economic development in business areas, but also in your homes and neighborhoods. Now onto those social benefits. So there's actually been found, research has found that there is a reduction in crime and car accidents. I'm forgetting the phrase now, but there is actually a 2 or 3 word phrase to encapsulate this. And it's really interesting to think about. Improved public health. It also helps you create that sense of community, whether it's through planting or it's through the actual presence of those trees. Elimination of urban heat islands, and of course the beautification of public spaces. So hopping into public safety here, I think that picture, those are Bartlett pears. So yeah, not a huge fan of that, but it's okay. So trees in the right-of-way and abundant vegetation around residential properties can actually help reduce property crimes. And a 2006 study of 10 urban arterial and highway sites in Texas actually found a 46% decrease in crash rates after landscape improvements, such as tree plantings and medians, were installed. So it has also been found that when you have vegetation, especially trees, when people are driving, it makes them slow down because they can actually tell how quickly they are moving. And in residential areas, we don't want to move too quickly anyway because people and animals and things can get in the road and we want to be safe. But it can be easy to slowly accelerate more than that if you can't tell how quickly things are passing you. And this also works on highways as well. As for the additional reduction, I believe the phrase that they use is meant to encapsulate a perception of the space, that it is more welcoming, more inviting, and so it reduces that risk. As for public health, so it has been also found that I actually would highly recommend you read this article by I don't know their first names. It was published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. It talks about the physiological benefits of viewing nature. So they found that just spending those 3 to 5 minutes viewing scenes dominated by nature, so trees, flowers, water, can significantly reduce anxiety, anger, and pain and promote that relaxation. They have a natural calming effect and improve mental well-being and help that emotional recovery. So there are activities such as forest bathing, where you can have a guided meditation out in the woods and around surrounded by other people, where you can just relax and have that space. And there's actually a marked reduction in cortisol in the body when spending time out in nature. And of course, beautification. I mean, which city do we want to live in? Do we want to live in the right or the left? So nature plays that crucial role in shaping the vibrant, healthy neighborhood spaces. We think about community tree plantings, and while it does physically beautify the space, it is also really important in creating that connection that further beautifies your community when you have those plantings where you work together. Urban residents tend to dislike treeless, barren common spaces. However, the addition of trees and grass can dramatically transform how these spaces are perceived. I mean, looking at just these two photos, you can tell the difference in how you feel about those things. But like I said, when you drive through one of those new neighborhood developments that have not got any vegetation or landscaping whatsoever, it feels very different from those older neighborhoods where it has a very robust tree canopy that covers the entire street. And on to those environmental benefits. Trees help with our stormwater uptake, reducing flooding and erosion. They have a cooling effect, of course, and that doesn't just impact humans, but that impacts our wildlife, including insects. Carbon sequestration, one of my favorite words. And it also provides that wildlife habitat. So, looking at this diagram here, we're going to run through it. So, trees actually help manage that stormwater first in their roots and their canopy. So, the root systems reduce that surface runoff, allowing water to be absorbed back into the soil. And then the canopy itself actually intercepts that rainfall, slowing its descent, just like we talked about with the streetscapes. That reduces the flooding that you might see and also improves that water quality by filtering pollutants and replenishing groundwater. So it's essentially holding that water in its place and slowing it so it doesn't cause flash floods. It doesn't run off into other spaces, picking up more debris as it goes along. And that's important for everything from the, as we're talking about here, the environment, but also for infrastructure and communities as well, because it keeps the sewer systems more clean and it prevents that overflow. It also reduces that urban heat island effect. So they've been shown to reduce that local temperature by as much as 22 degrees Fahrenheit. One of my favorite activities to do with kiddos, especially, is to take those heat guns, like thermometers, that we used to use for COVID or to measure the temperature of the space, and taking them out in the middle of summer, showing them how different the temperature is beneath a tree in the shade versus, say, on a blacktop or even in the grass. It definitely reduces that heat that you feel, and you get that concentration, especially in urban areas. So adding more green spaces reduces that effect and leaves everybody feeling much more comfortable. Carbon sequestration. So we all know that air or trees clean our air, so they actually do direct absorption of carbon dioxide from the air during their photosynthesis process. A forest tree over its entire lifetime can store up to 22 tons of carbon dioxide in its trunk. Now imagine that's as a forest tree, so that's of course in this ecosystem that has all of these additional things. But even if we have that for urban trees, that's a massive amount of CO2 removed from the air and improving that air quality for our urban and suburban areas. And of course, our wildlife habitat and food sources. So if we think about the food sources, trees provide fruits, nuts, insects. Not just that, but also the bark, the leaves, pretty much every part of a tree, some type of organism has found a way to make use of it. And it also provides that habitat. So something that a lot of people also don't realize, especially as we has shown a great light on the monarch issue. Monarchs definitely do need the milkweed that we're looking at. But what a lot of people don't realize is that adult monarchs, while they do lay their eggs and grow, and their caterpillars grow on common milkweed and butterfly milkweed, and they use that as a food source. During the night, they need trees to roost and to roost safely. It provides that coverage that they need overnight away from the food sources and other insects and birds that may damage their populations further. So when people are looking at providing monarch habitat, I often say, yes, please plant the native forbs and grasses, but also remember to put some trees in there, especially if you're looking at tagging, to make sure that they have a safe place to roost overnight. So not just that, the habitat also is provided for bees, small mammals, of course, birds and deer, and then of other pollinators. So everything that we talked about today, if this is something that you would like to return to this information, of course, I am happy to provide the presentation. It has all the links to those articles, but also if you just want to reference these things or even share this information with others, Trees Forever actually has an entire resources page. If you go there, there's a file labeled benefits of trees, and there are seven different handouts and files that are available for free for you to print and share with others to give this information. So they go over things like climate change, the benefits of roadside plantings, which also includes those native forbs and grasses, how you can advocate for trees, explaining why trees matter, talking a little bit more about that trees and public health and how it can improve your community in that way, and then going over those savings and just general benefits of trees. That's at treesforever.org/resources, or if you go to our main page, there is a resources tab. And I want to remind everyone as well, the benefits of trees only grow over time. Whenever I do plantings, especially with kiddos, I always talk with the adults about how often it is that many of us do these plantings when we're young and it feels very inconsequential, but then every time we come back and we see that tree again and see how much it grows as we get older, it makes an even bigger impact. So it may seem like something so small and trivial now, but it only grows over time. And now we're going to take some questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bree. That was very good. I'm going to go ahead and put our quiz in the field. Um, yeah, but as we're looking at the quiz, does anyone have any questions for Bree? Feel free to drop those in the chat if so. Do you have a favorite species of tree, Bree?
You're not gonna like it. I actually really like ginkgos and lilacs.
Okay.
I like the shape of the ginkgo leaf, but also when they senesce and drop their leaves, they actually drop all their leaves at once. So if you're happening
Yeah.
to sit under a ginkgo during the fall, you may just have it drop everything on you.
Very good. Yeah, I would have to say mine is the Kentucky coffee tree because I
Oh.
like that the ugly duckling aspect of it
Mhm.
always endears it to me somewhat.
It gets called affectionately the ugly stick tree when you first plant it.
Yeah, but when it does bloom, it's so brilliant and
Oh
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we do have a question here from Derek. Do trees and vegetation increase humidity slash temperature?
They tend not to. They can actually remove moisture from the air. It tends to be in the soil that it sticks. Um, it actually, a lot of plants, people don't realize, also do a little bit of cellular respiration, which removes that water from the air as well. Um, I'm sorry, did I make sure to answer both parts of the question?
Do trees and vegetation increase humidity and temperature?
No, so yeah, it won't also increase that temperature due to the shade that it provides. It's really interesting to think about how these things kind of evolved. So the reason that trees have these flat leaves and the way that they're arranged so that they all face upwards and create that canopy that doesn't allow light to come through is because the trees are essentially being greedy. They want all of that light. And so they've created these flat things and appendages to increase their surface area and absorb as much light as possible. And that has also helped us. And it helps them as well because you don't want those tree roots to get too dry. It also protects the moisture level in the ground as well. But they want to hold on to that moisture as much as possible and not release it wherever they can. But typically, no, it does not increase temperature or humidity.
We have another question here from Candace. Does Trees Forever try and work with city municipalities in spreading awareness of planting native trees rather than non-native? And I will say yes, absolutely. And
Mhm.
especially like in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines, we've been doing a lot of work with those municipalities to encourage native tree species. And Bree, I don't if you want to talk about what's been going on in the field as well.
Oh yeah, our field staff in Iowa, and we're starting to work on that out here in Illinois. They're always available for education. We have tons of resources. There is a recommended tree species list that we have available online, and it actually labels which trees are native. And if you ever need to request a presentation or anything, please feel free to reach out. And the resources that I shared at the end of the presentation, that's only the tip of the iceberg with what's available out there.
We have a fun fact from Jack who says when trees first evolved and took over the earth, they caused a global cooling via removing too many
Mhm.
greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. I
Yeah.
didn't actually know that. Interesting.
It's really cool. I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's paleobotany. It is so cool. So since trees were the first thing, a lot of our the oil that we actually get for our cars and everything that we dig up and we're like, oh, it's the dinosaur bones. It's actually those
Hmm.
first trees that fell
Hmm.
and
Interesting.
covered everything.
Oh, we had a couple more questions come in. Do urban trees require irrigation now in Iowa?
It
Actually, not
depends.
sure on that. Yeah.
It really depends. A lot of times we recommend trees, and a lot of communities have picked up on this. They choose trees that are more resilient to like the salt and the not so great soil conditions and things like that that they may have. And a lot of trees have also been bred to be more resistant and resilient. We do highly recommend when you first plant a tree that you water it regularly. And we have these awesome things like the gator bags, which essentially is like just this water bag that you kind of velcro to the tree. You fill it up every so often, and it slowly leaches that water into the soil. And then another product is actually called a tree diaper. And it's called that because the CEO wanted to find a way to reuse that gel that's actually found in diapers, but it's not all reused like that. But they found that through reverse osmosis, if you just put the tree diaper on the ground and you just water it once, it leaches that water out of the soil when there's excess. And then the reverse happens when the soil gets dry. And so it helps keep it moist as it's growing. Most trees don't need that additional irrigation after the first 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Sally asks, do the types of soil affect types of trees that grow well in that soil, such as like gumbo type soil?
Oh yes. I don't know too much about gumbo type soil, but we highly recommend, like I said, right tree, right place. Make sure you know what your tree appreciates. We say, do they like wet feet? Do they like dry feet? Meaning, do they prefer more wet soils or dry? Like you wouldn't put a birch in an area that does not get a lot of rain. But things like the Kentucky coffee tree can be a lot more resilient for that. Usually, if you just do a little bit of research on the trees that you're looking at, you can get an idea of the soil ecology that they prefer. Um, and like I said, when you're establishing any tree, those first 2 to 3 years are so important. So just keep an eye on that moisture as it's getting there, but also before planting, look up what they need.
Yep. All right. I think oh, another one came in. Mary asks, do you recommend planting trees near a retention pond or creek?
Okay, so I say yes, but your city parks department probably won't like me. It can help. It can definitely help with that water retention, especially if you have flooding concerns. A lot of communities have actually found great success in planting native forbs and grasses, since that's a little bit more low and it doesn't require as much input after the initial planting. The other issue that you run into, because most retention ponds are maintained by city staff, they don't like mowing around trees very much. But yeah, I always recommend it. More vegetation is always better for retaining that water.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll go over the quiz real quick. So question number one was non-native tree species tend to support wildlife populations better than native species. And pretty much everybody got that right. That is false. Question number two was trees absorb carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. That is true, as most of you guessed correctly. And then question three, this was a little bit of a trick question, but which of the following is considered a social benefit that trees provide? While all the answers are benefits that they provide, elimination of urban heat islands was the correct answer, as that's more of a social benefit, whereas property values is more of an economic benefit. We can, yeah, that's arguable, I suppose, but yeah, great job, everybody, and thank you so much, Bree. We really appreciate it. Great presentation
Of
today.
course. Want to stop sharing here.
All righty. Well, everybody, with the completion of that presentation, you are all now considered to be Trees Forever tree keepers. Congratulations. Give yourselves a round of applause. So on behalf of everybody here at Trees Forever, we want to thank you all for sticking with us this long. You guys did great. Your attention to detail, all the questions and engagement you have been great. So I guess the question is, you're a tree keeper now. What does that mean? So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, hopefully you can all see my screen. But yeah, to just kind of review a little bit about what it means to be a tree keeper. But as a Trees Forever tree keeper, you have now learned about tree care, and we hope that you'll consider helping Trees Forever plant and care for trees in your community or any other organization in that does the same thing. We hope you'll be a voice for the trees in your community. So as we kind of just went over with Bree, there's a lot of things to love about trees. We just want to make sure people know what's great about them. So spreading the word as much as you can is always going to be a benefit. Trees Forever field staff are always out and about doing work in communities, so absolutely look at our website to see if you can help out with that. And we also absolutely encourage you to take the initiative, organize tree plantings yourselves and care days within your community. If you happen to be friends with any of your fellow tree keepers or nobody who would be interested in that, feel free to contact us and we can definitely advise you through the process of organizing a tree planting or a care day or anything like that. And we will continue to have educational workshops throughout the year that are going to be online, available to everyone. So we definitely encourage you to check those out. Some examples of some projects you can encourage or organize. Watering is always needed with trees. That first 2 years that after they've been planted, they need lots of water to survive. So we could use all the help we can get on that. Helping to weed or remove grass or help mulch around trees is always helpful. Recruiting other tree keepers and helpers to complete projects or join the class. And Trees Forever and the DNR often have grants available if you want to organize your own tree planting. Like I said, yeah, tree advocacy is a big part of what you can do as a tree keeper. Every oak tree started out as a couple of nuts who decided to stand their ground. We love that quote around here. Iowa was originally 20% forest, so today it is 4%. So we need lots of work to restore that. But be the eyes and ears for your local trees. So reach out to your local, Parks and Rec department, your forestry department. If you see trees that are struggling and need a pruning, it can be very helpful to kind of shout that out to people and make sure that gets taken care of. And also just in your day-to-day interactions, just take the information you've learned, share that with other people, seek support from other people in your community, and find out what other communities are doing and take that information to the people in charge and see if you can't organize something. And you can always talk or write to an elected official, let them know that you support tree care efforts in your community, or address the mayor and city council annually to stress the benefits of trees and build relationships with those elected officials. If they start to see you or your group as valuable assets for tree issues, then you'll remain, a stakeholder in that process, and that can be very useful. But trees need champions, and we hope that with the knowledge that you've all learned with us, that you'll become those champions.